industry analyst in the space for 12 years, and I'm going to share with you a little bit about my insights from writing a couple of books. I recently wrote a book called Metrics That Matter, and I'd worked with about 600 companies at AMR Research, and I had heard companies get at conferences and put their shoulders back and say they had reduced costs, they improved inventory, and improved customer service, and you've heard the story too. So 2012 was the 30th anniversary of supply chain. When Source, Make, and Deliver were written about together, it was 1982. So I wanted to write a celebratory book about first and second generation supply chain pioneers, and I started plotting the balance sheet information of inventory turns and operating margin, and I found 90% of companies were stuck, that they weren't making progress on inventory turns and operating margins together, despite all the projects that we had had. And I wanted to understand why, and so I started looking at research around why. And I believe that the basic definition of what we call APS is flawed, that forecastability, that our ability to forecast products has grown worse as we have added products to the item master. So we've added complexity, and forecastability has become more difficult. And so I'm currently doing work with 10 very large companies around how forecastability has changed. And then we had this concept that we would have rules-based consumption, where we would consume the forecast into DRP. And I also think that's very flawed, because we don't sense, we respond. And so our systems are really inside out. We wait for orders and shipments, and then we respond. And so we've had a lot of technologies grow up around sensing demand patterns and replacement of rules-based consumption. And then one of the things that I've been studying is how satisfied are people with planning systems. So I did a study of 187 planning instances where I looked at return on investment and value proposition, and did the planners use the systems. And I'm very interested that best-of-breed providers actually have higher user satisfaction, greater use of the system, and better return on investment than our extended ERP systems. So we went through 2 generations of planning, right? The first generation was in 1990, and then we went through the integrated ERP systems. And because we've so tightly coupled planning to ERP, we can't do things like what-if analysis, so we can't get to data. And so the study, and if anybody would like, I studied 187 instances to look at what is the relative return on investment and the time for value, and which systems were giving us the greatest value. And what I found is when we decouple planning and we use the ERP systems for records, so SAP APO or SCM7 as a system of record, and we augment with optimization technologies, and we embrace new forms of technology, that we're able to really drive planning. The other thing I learned is that the supply chain is a complex system, and that the relationships between inventory, customer service, and operating margin are nonlinear. And that when you plot the patterns, that deterministic optimization that we had in the 1990s is not sufficient. And so as we go through the evolution of pattern recognition and cognitive learning, which Steve is going to talk about, there's a real need for us to up the ante, to not just be so dependent on deterministic optimization to deal with the systems of the complex system. So one of the things that I'm studying is the evolution of analytics to help us with planning, to help us with supply chain visibility, and what those systems look like. I think we're 5 years away from learning systems that can allow us to have supply chain visibility systems, that planners can have systems that learn as they sleep. We're very, very close. I also think we're in the redefinition of the third act of planning, with new forms of analytics that replace the traditional APS systems and new forms of visualization.